Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Some politics now, and we probably all have our own view of Theresa May's shimmy to Dancing Queen last week, ranging from squirming embarrassment to good on her cheerleading. But what looked like a clear attempt to mock her by the President of the Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, became the talking point today on a day in which Downing Street was heavily playing down the sense that a deal might be close. Just as well, perhaps, because it also emerged that the EU has shelved a plan to outline what its future relationship with Britain might be. I'm joined, of course, by Robert, who is here. Robert, I feel we should just have a look. Can we just have a look at this picture first? Because it really is quite something. He's definitely having a go, isn't he? I mean, we've had the cherry on the cake and everything. What do you make of that?
Well, look, you've got to decide whether you think that is malicious mickey-taking or a little bit of jokey solidarity. Now, look, I've spoken to Downing Street, as you would expect, to see if they're offended, and they say no, they think it's just a bit of fun and they quite like it. So, look, I don't think this is the beginning of World War III with the rest of the EU. I mean, interestingly, you say that Downing Street were playing down the prospect of an imminent deal, but when I talk to ministers and when I talk to EU Commission people, they're all much more optimistic that a deal will be struck, which I don't really understand because the hurdles to a Brexit deal are formidable. She's got to persuade the rest of the EU to let us effectively stay inside the single market for goods, but be outside for services and not have free movement of people. That's something that many EU leaders hate. She's got to persuade her own DUP, the partners in government, the people propping her up from Northern Ireland, that actually having checks on goods going from Great Britain to Northern Ireland to check they meet EU standards, that is something they will accept. She's got to persuade people like David Davis and the true Brexit wing of the Tory party that it would be OK to stay in the customs union in a worst case, if she can't get a long-term deal, forever. Now, these are formidable obstacles. She's got days to get over them. People are telling me there's going to be a Brexit deal. I would not put the prospects of that much higher than 50-50 at the moment.
OK, we will see. But, Robert, for now, thank you very much indeed. Now, still on a similar subject, News at 10 heard more evidence today of the concerns about the potential impact of Brexit on British trade. The Port of Dover told us it is worried about what it called the painfully slow progress on assessing the effect of likely trade tariffs in the event of no deal. The EU accounts for 44% of all our exports, according to a new report from the Institute of Fiscal Studies. For imports, the UK is even more reliant on the EU. It accounts for 53% of all that we bring in. The IFS has calculated that the impact on the UK of falling back on World Trade Organization tariffs would hit the food and drink sector hardest. But will that mean higher prices? No, according to the Brexit supporting boss of Wetherspoon, because he says there would be a revolution.
For so long, Brexit has been a dot on the horizon, but the point of departure is fast approaching. Port of Dover is a gateway to Europe. The scale of the trade that flows through here is extraordinary. 7,000 lorries a day, clearing customs in seconds. But Britain's leaving the customs union and the single market, and the port is worried it may not cope.
So here you're looking at one of DFDS's ships from Calais discharging.
The port says the introduction of customs checks and tariffs here would cause gridlock. It's proposed a contingency plan to government, but is still waiting for a response.
It's taking a painfully long time to finalise the process.
There are other ports in the UK, and they argue if Dover ends up struggling, that they will simply pick up the slack.
They can't. The Port of Dover, as I say, handles 2.6 million lorries every year. That's more than every other UK ferry port put together.
Minutes from the Port of Dover is a business built on free trade with the EU. Most of the aluminium panels made here are shipped to the continent. Disruption post-Brexit is likely to cost it customers.
We're able to promise that if a dispatch goes on a Friday, it's with them by the next Wednesday. If they're stuck in transit, they may need to source material elsewhere.
The government wants a free trade area with the EU, allowing cargo to move around as easily as it does today. The EU says if Britain wants free movement of goods, it will have to accept all four of its freedoms, including free movement of people. Now, if there is no agreement, if there is no deal, then tariffs will kick in. If Britain ends up trading with the EU on WTO rules, the Institute for Fiscal Studies calculates the cost of importing and exporting processed food and drink would rise by 38%. The cost of shipping farm produce and fish would go up 25%, and clothing and textiles by 21%. Tariffs, customs checks, new rules and regulations would make trade generally more expensive, damaging growth and costing jobs. Wetherspoons has been busy replacing French champagne with English sparkling, but 1/5 of what's on sale here is still imported from the EU. Would no deal push up prices on the menu? The boss, who campaigned to leave, says not, because he argues tariffs won't happen.
I know what it would cost if we imposed the tariffs that they charge in Brussels, but it's irrelevant. No, I'm not. No, it's not relevant.
It's the worst case scenario.
No, it's not. It's a sensational scenario. If the Parliament decides to impose tariffs on food, there will be a revolution.
Dover sits at the foot of a cliff edge. Britain sits atop one. Most economists agree that deal or no deal, leaving the EU will damage trade to some extent and therefore our prosperity. Joel Hills, News at 10, Dover.